In general, I do not trust people who introduce themselves as former atheists who are now Christians, which is kind of ironic because I'm a former atheist who is now Christian. But let me explain this. Often, when you have a former atheist who is now Christian, one of the big things that they tend to say is that, hey, I've researched all of this. I went from not believing to believing based on the evidence. And that is generally nonsense. So, in order to demonstrate this, I think we can look at Lee Strobel as the classic case for this. Now, in his book, The Case for Christ, what we see is that he isn't really doing proper research. Instead, he's looking at only one very small section of the scholarship. His approach is anything but critical, and that's because he's only looking at a very small subset of the actual scholarship. And that scholarship that he looks at is all apologetics. It's not the mainline approach, it's not the consensus approach. So, in essence, he's really cherry picking what he wants to study. And this would suggest something a little bit more sinister that he wasn't actually looking for a proper answer, a critical answer. He already had the answer, and he was just looking for scholars who would support that. This means the entire search that he did was just intellectually dishonest because he already had the answer that he was going to get regardless. The research really only supported what he already believed. There is another thing at play here, and it's a logical fallacy. So often, when we look at these atheists who turn Christian, they tend to claim that, hey, I believed all of these things that the stereotypical atheist believed, but then I found the truth, meaning that everything that atheists believe is not true. Now, often their new belief takes a very apologetic nature that actually ignores the vast amount of evidence. And what this can tell us is that if they were in fact atheists, this is probably how they actually addressed that information to begin with. They never really studied the ideas that atheism supposedly has, but instead had a very uncritical view at that point, and that only transferred over when they took on Christianity. So, what this generally amounts to is going from one uncritical approach to another. It doesn't mean that they knew everything that atheism taught or atheism believed and then finally found out the truth through real research. It meant that they were uninformed in one subject and then went into another field and were still uninformed. Conversely, I feel the same way about ex Christians who are now atheists. Generally, what we see is people going from one uncritical approach to another uncritical approach. That doesn't change at all. The only thing that changes are their beliefs.